How did the roadshow go? How much are you hoping to raise? How hungry were the investors for Zimbabwe debt?
Well, clearly investors are hungry for yield. They're searching for yield everywhere. We're trying to raise 200 million US dollars, but also we're testing the market to see if we should tranche it. Of course, they are worried about risk, so we want to make sure that we lower that risk for them while maximizing the yield. So we want to make sure that we can, set aside certain revenues and escrow them so as to service the coupons, but also want to source some insurance to further ensure the returns for the investors. So we want to do everything to make sure that this bond is attractive.
I mean, let's talk about some ballpark ranges then. I know that your yield and your tenor, you're still working on that, but what's kind of your feeling as to what could come through from this, and how are you going to reassure creditors who are going to be quite worried about previous inabilities to repay?
Well, I mean, you're looking at yields somewhere between sort of 6 to 9%. That's the kind of range. In terms of repayment, we are going to do two things. One is to basically ring-fence specific revenues that we earn as a country through Treasury in an escrow account to make sure that we can service the coupons on the bond. But also we're going to procure some insurance for the bond to make sure that the risks are reduced substantially. We will be able to service the bond. We've begun servicing other loans that we owe. So after 20 years of not paying, we've begun paying those loans. So we're building a track record, and I can assure investors that we'll be able to service this bond.
Look, one of the concerns, and obviously those are the sureties that you're trying to give the international community to get on board with you here. Obviously, currency is a critically important thing. They're going to be the denomination of these bonds are going to be in which currency? And can I ask you about your own currency? Because the official exchange rate there is 86.1. And the parallel market, that's almost doubled. So the question is, does it need to be devalued? Does the official level need to be devalued to reassure investors that you are taking things seriously?
Thanks very much for those questions. There's two questions in one. One is what currency is the bond? Our bond is in US dollars. Within Zimbabwe, we accept US dollars as a transaction currency. So investors or citizens are able to use US dollars very easily. But this bond will be issued in our offshore financial center, and we're going to list it on the new stock exchange, the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, which is a US dollar stock exchange. So there is no exchange rate risk here. Secondly, the sources of revenues that will, service this bond are actually US dollar revenues that we earn as a government. We're going to ring-fence US dollar revenues to make sure that there's no currency risk whatsoever. So we've taken out currency risk, but also we'll further ensure the bond, as I said, provide insurance for it so as to lower any default risk on it. Then in terms of the exchange rate that you mentioned, basically easily 90% of transactions in the FX market in Zimbabwe, foreign currency market, take place at the auction rate, at the rate that you've mentioned, of about 86 to the US dollar. That's the dominant market. We do have a fringe activity on the power market, but that's very small. Really, the bulk of the transactions are on the official auction rate, which has done tremendous for the economy in terms of stabilizing the exchange rate, but also making sure that we can reduce inflation, engender certainty in the economy, allowing companies to better plan, and they are doing that, and they're investing. Companies will be able to source for retooling.
You're in the trenches then of currency reform, and the kind of question comes up around cryptocurrencies. We saw El Salvador take the lead in terms of making it legal tender. I wonder how you look at the El Salvador story, and what kind of lessons you can maybe draw in terms of adding a new angle to a fresh start for the Zimbabwean currency approach.
Oh, well, cryptocurrency and these digital assets are just another asset class. That's how we see things. So we have no problems in exploring how this could be useful in future as an asset class, but perhaps not yet as a transaction currency, because as a transaction currency, it's quite volatile. You've seen what has happened to Bitcoin and so forth. So we're exploring these as an asset class. And once we make progress on it again, this is the type of asset class that would, have traded, make sure that it is available in the offshore financial center, but not locally in terms of the domestic assets.
Mthuli, can I ask you, Christine Lagarde was very clear when she spoke to Bloomberg in the past couple of days about cryptocurrencies. And she was very clear. She said it's a highly speculative asset. It's not a currency. And obviously she talked about stable coins as being something else. How advanced are you in the discussion or the investigation of cryptocurrencies?
No, we're still investigating. We have basically a sandbox where we evaluate all these various proposals, various options. But really the intention is not to have this as a transaction currency, but rather as an investment asset class. And even then, once we've made a decision, we would ring-fence this in the offshore financial center so that it is not really circulating locally in a way. So in a sense, I kind of agree with Christine Lagarde that the volatility is something that we should worry about. It's not easy to turn this into a transacting currency. But look, things evolve over time. I'm here in New York, and I realize that there's so much excitement around cryptocurrency and digital assets. So we also continue to watch the space and do more research so that we move with the rest of the world.
Minister, you've revised your inflation targets upwards to about 25 to 30% by year end. And even though it's double digit and, for pretty much most countries around the world, that's a pretty high figure by Zimbabwean standards. It's a huge improvement from what used to be triple digits, 700-800%. What else are you looking at in terms of trying to cool the inflationary pressure? And to what extent are you reliant on what you get from abroad in terms of imports that are, fueling the flames of these cost pressures?
Well, first of all, what drives inflation in Zimbabwe in the main is the exchange rate volatility. So we're making sure that we run monetary policy properly through targeting money balances in terms of targeting reserve money M0. We have a target, and also we're making sure that the fiscal side is very tightly run. We are balancing the budget to make sure the budget is not, or budget deficit rather, is not a source of growth of money. But also we're going to use interest rate policy to rein in on any excess demand for credit in the market. But also we continue to watch the global economy. There's so much liquidity sloshing around in the global economy, pushing up inflation globally. And that, again, that's something we should worry about. But in terms of fundamentals, we're doing everything we can to contain inflation through proper monetary policy management, fiscal policy management, and everything that needs to be done to control inflation and the movement of the exchange rate.
One of the things, I was in Egypt last week, and one of the things that came through from some of the representatives from African nations was the availability of vaccine. Can you give our audience a sense of where you are on vaccine availability, rollout, and percentage of the nation covered?
We've done quite well as Zimbabwe. So far, we've procured 12 million doses of vaccines, which have arrived, which have come in. That should be able to cover 6 million Zimbabweans in terms of 2 doses. And they were driving towards herd immunity, which will be about 10 million people in the next few months. So we've done very well. We've bought these vaccines. We've received very little in terms of donations. And we're pleased that Zimbabweans have welcomed the vaccine, and we're pushing hard to make sure that we get to that herd immunity.
Right.